This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Darrius Stewart is Memphis' version of Mike Brown. The Artivist thinks. On July 17th, 2015, a routine traffic stop, or rather a supposed routine traffic stop, became a nightmare for Darrius Stewart and his friend Ricky Taylor. Ricky Taylor was pulled over in his Chevrolet Cruze, I believe, by Officer Connor Schilling for allegedly having a headlight out on the night of July 17th, 2015, which was a Friday on Winchester Road in Memphis, Tennessee, near New Directions Church, one of their locations. And what is strange about this traffic pullover in my mind was the fact that Officer Connor Schilling asked for the background information on his passenger, who happened to be Darrius Stewart, Ricky Taylor's friend. They went to high school together. And so Darrius Stewart did not have the proper ID on him, and his friend was allowed to run to their apartment complex, which was nearby, to retrieve his proper identification. And what was strange, like, okay, Darrius Stewart, he's a passenger in the car that was pulled over for a traffic violation. Okay. The officer then put Darrius Stewart in the back of his patrol car. This is from my understanding. He looks up his background. He see a Darrius Stewart comes up in the system that there's an outstanding warrant on a Darrius Stewart out of Iowa. But the Darrius Stewart that's in his patrol car, he spelled his name Darrius with 2 R's. The Darrius Stewart that pops up in the system after doing a check only has 1 R in Darrius. And the friend is still away from the scene trying to retrieve Darrius Stewart's proper identification. So my understanding is that the cop, he feel like this is the Darrius Stewart that's wanted out of Iowa for something that happened when he was 13 years old. Now, Darrius is 19, just graduated from high school, from a 2009 incident involving sexual misconduct with minors. And so, from my understanding, Connor Schilling said as he went to arrest or handcuff Darrius Stewart, that the two got in a scuffle on the street on the property of New Direction, from what I could tell from my onlooker's video. Somebody recorded the fight, quote unquote, that Darrius Stewart and Connor Schilling was involved in. And by the time that Ricky Taylor arrived with the proper identification, along with Darrius Stewart's mom, Darrius Stewart lay dying out in public. Now, this is crazy, y'all. I'm trying to think. This is very fascinating. Unlike the Mike Brown situation, we actually do have footage of Darrius Stewart and Officer Connor Schilling, quote unquote, duking it out in the Memphis streets, like on the ground. It looked like that Officer Schilling is getting the best of Darrius Stewart, you know. And the thing about this is very fascinating to me is the fact that black people always seem to find an excuse to justify their own genocide. Black folks are so easy at coming up with excuses to justify their own genocide. I've been looking at the social media for the last several days as this case get more exposure. It has not get the national exposure of a Sandra Bland or Eric Gardner or a Mike Brown or Walter Scott yet, because Memphis is a different animal. Memphis is an interesting place. It's a very lethargic, sleepy plantation town. on the river. This is probably the place that the song Old Man River talk about. If you listen to the song, the original lyrics of, if you read the original lyrics of Old Man River, it describes Memphis perfectly. He got a majority black town. There's really, their black leadership is a bunch of puppets for white power. For white power structure. So really it's white power in blackface. So you got all these black folks is in high places and faces. We got a black mayor. We have a black mayor since 91. The current mayor is A.C. Wharton. We got a black police director. We got a majority black city council. We got black folks, all these positions of quote unquote power and influence. But really it's still the white fathers that's calling the shots. It's still the FedExes and the international papers and the AutoZones that calling the shots here in Memphis. So you got this certain mentality with Negroes down in Memphis. This is a reason why it was a perfect place for Dr. King to get killed. It's a great reason why they have a prominent equestrian statue of General Nathan Bedford Forrest on a prominent street, a very busy street, with the first Grand Wizard, notorious slave trader, and suspect war criminal buried with his wife under that statue. They've been buried there since 1904. The $5 million statue was erected there in 1905. And although the city council has voted to change the name of the park and quote unquote voted to evict the bodies of Forrest and his wife, they have yet to make any major moves on that property. And it's being subsidized by the taxpayers of this city, who are majority black and who would not have been treated the equal of Nathan Bedford Forrest during his time on this planet, but we've been seen as property and inferior. But that's another story. Let's get back to Darrius Stewart. How can any black person, after watching what happened to Sandra Bland, after watching what happened to brother Eric Gardner, after watching what happened to Walter Scott, could justify the murder of Darrius Stewart based on what he allegedly did or didn't do in the past? Because, just because there's a warrant out for a person's arrest does not mean that person committed a crime. There are a lot of innocent people on death row in jails across America, because the name of the game of the justice system is not about justice. It's about profit. It's about the bottom line. But getting back to Darrius Stewart, there is no good reason why a cop will go out his way to figure out the passenger background information in a traffic stop if you pulling over the driver for something like a busted tail light or a headlight. I mean, it's kind of weird. And then the friend is allowed to leave the traffic pullover to retrieve his friend Darrius Stewart's proper ID. If they right by the apartment, why not just call his mom and have her bring down the proper identification? Why was it required for the friend to leave? Why? Think about this, ladies and gentlemen, scholars and laymen. If they're right by their apartment, why was it required for the friend to leave the scene? That's something to think about. And it's something that the mainstream news or the corporate media, I ain't gonna call them mainstream, call it corporate media. I call it agenda media. The agenda media, the mainstream agenda media locally here are not pointing these type of things out. What they are focusing on is the character assassination of brother Darrius Stewart. Brother Darrius Stewart may have warrants or may have had warrants out for his arrest, but he would never have his day in court to tell his side of the story, unfortunately. He would not be allowed to do that because his life was taken from him the night of July 17th, 2015. And my problem with black people in particular is not, what people got to understand is that nobody's a complete angel. in this system. And black folks, a lot of us are so religious, and they always say, "Well, we born into sin." You're not gonna be perfect in an imperfect world. You're not gonna be perfect in an imperfect world. If you live long enough, you're gonna do some stuff. Now, I'm not justifying, molesting people, or whatnot, but what I'm saying is, we don't know what really happened. From my understanding is, okay, back in 2009, when Darrius was 13, his aunt reported him to the authorities up in Iowa, where he was living at the time. And according to the aunt, from what I've been reading, allegedly she caught them in a closet or in the bedroom, caught Darrius, age 13, with two minors, two 12-year-old boys. One was his cousin, and one was the cousin's friend. And according to the auntie, from what I have read, the boys described what Darrius did to them or made them do. And she told this to the authorities. Now, the mom at first was saying it was mistaken identity with the warrant, but she also said that there was a family beef or vendetta of some sort. There was some family things going on. So we don't really know what the truth of the matter is. And just because he was said in the warrant or whatever to have done these things does not mean that he did those things. And even if he done those things, which I do not approve of, it does not justify what happened to him on July 17th, 2015. My thing is this: if that incident happened when he was a minor, they could have dealt with that when he was a minor. When he was 13 and not 19, they should have been dealt with. In my opinion, people say, well, they couldn't find him. Hell, if the family was the one that, quote unquote, told the authorities, then they could have found him if they wanted to find him. Evidently, they found him at this traffic stop because the warrant out of Iowa was reissued on June the 30th, 2015. This is what I read in sources. It was reissued on June 30th, 2015. Darrius Stewart was in the car that was pulled over July 17th, 2015. And before the end of July 17th, 2015, Darrius Stewart was dead or lay dying in a Memphis street. You don't think that's strange, ladies and gentlemen, scholars and laymen? I just told you that his friend was allowed to leave a traffic stop that he, was the driver in to retrieve his friend's quote-unquote information from the apartment complex where he lived. And he was able to bring the mom back along with the identification, I believe, and they found Darrius in the street dead or dying. Okay. Well, actually, not only was Darrius Stewart killed in Memphis streets, he actually, I believe, he lay dying on the property of New Direction Church, which is located in Winchester. They got two locations on Winchester. And so I have yet to hear anything from the church officials, the leadership from New Direction Church on what happened. But I know one thing is that, black folks are under attack in this system. And they always attack us at our strongest point when you're dealing with white supremacy, racism. And the black church is most deaf under attack. And what is really sad is the black church is very silent at the moment that the people need some type of moral compass. And you might say, well, that's not true. Yeah, it is true. The church is really absent. I mean, and when you do see the church, it's about singing hymns and songs and praying. But like to paraphrase Brother Frederick Douglass, he prayed for 20 years and God only answered his prayer when he started praying with his legs. Faith without works, people. And we're not keeping the faith because we're not keeping busy with work that produce results. So that's something we need to be thinking about right now. Black folks are catching hell, but where is the black church to provide salvation? This is very interesting because we went from a church that produced people like Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, Denmark Vesey, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, Henry Highland Garnett, John Coltrane, and Aretha Franklin. We went from that, Dr. King, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., to what now? Mega churches, prosperity preaching. Wow, any hope? You preaching prosperity in the place of cessful poverty, a poverty spirit. A broken spirit. But anyway, I digress. So what about the officer Connor Schilling? What's his story? Well, my understanding, Connor Schilling has his run-ins with the law as well. For example, back in 2014, he was given a DUI down in South Haven, Mississippi, and he was suspended without pay for 18 days for driving under the influence. So he was suspended without pay for 18 days. And also, he had a run-in with a black motorist in Memphis on the expressway. Run-in meaning that he was accused of aggressive behavior and laying hands on a sister. And she filed a complaint, and I believe it didn't stick. But she was on news not too long ago after the Darrius Stewart tragedy. And she said, had they took her seriously, I'm paraphrasing her, back then, I believe it was 2013, this might not would have happened to Darrius Stewart on July 17, 2015. So this guy is no stranger, Connor Schilling, the quote-unquote officer in question. It was interesting about Darrius and Connor. They're both from Mississippi. Darrius was born in Greenwood, Mississippi. And Connor Schilling actually, he went to college at Mississippi State, but ended up dropping out for whatever reason. And he joined the police force, I believe, Memphis police force, back in 2012. And I'm thinking about all this stuff with the cases of black folks getting killed or getting done wrong by the police. You look at a lot of these cases, a lot of these guys are white males in their 20s. Some of them probably had military training, probably just came fresh from their tour of duty in Iraq or Afghanistan, probably dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. Even the person that pulled over Senator Bland, I believe that was his first year on the job as a state trooper. That Brian Encinia, whatever his name is. That was his first year as a state trooper, but he was a supervisor at an ice cream factory. It was one of his jobs, and also he was working with the fire department, I believe, in that area. But anyway, getting back to Memphis. So you have a cop that got a DUI back in 2014, was suspended without pay for 18 days. And here's the interesting thing about that situation, the DUI. The arresting or the officer that gave him the DUI charge, the one that pulled him over and gave him all that, he did not show up in court for 2 times. You know, when Schilling was due in court twice to face that charge, the officer who issued the ticket did not show up. So what do y'all think about that? That the officer who gave this DUI charge to Connor Schilling did not show up to court to defend his position twice. So is that coincidence, or is there something more going on here? So getting back, was the focus of the stop was to get Darrius Stewart? Was that a setup? Now I want y'all to research this on your own. You got all this stuff out there about this Darrius Stewart thing and Connor Schilling, but look at that stuff. And that's what made me think that this Darrius Stewart thing is the Mike Brown situation for Memphis. I knew it was coming with Memphis because we've been in national headlines a lot. For example, for our teens. If you look at what happened recently at the BP gas station near Northwest Prep Academy, where the black motorist and Good Samaritan caught a beatdown by a group of black kids from that high school. Or you look at what happened last year at the Kroger's, where a worker got beat down by a mob of black kids as well. You can tell that Memphis is going to be one of them hot spots. I told people this is probably one of the hot spots coming up very soon. But also with Memphis got very lethargic and a really slow mindset. Like I said, this is a plantation town. It's on the river. You look at all the plantation towns. You got New Orleans. You got St. Louis. You got Memphis. You got Davenport, Iowa. But look at all that. New Orleans. Look at St. Louis. You look at what happened. Go to 10th year anniversary of Katrina coming up next month with New Orleans. You got the Mike Brown situation in St. Louis, Ferguson, some other things that's approaching the 1 year anniversary on August 9th, 2015. the day that Mike Brown was killed, August 9th, 2014. It's about to be the 1 year anniversary, which is crazy when you think about it. And Memphis has yet to have their Ferguson or their Katrina. Memphis is long overdue for a Ferguson or a Katrina. We sit on a fault line, New Madrid fault line. We're overdue for I guess, great quake. The last great quake that happened in this area happened in the 18 teens. It was so powerful, made the Mississippi River run backwards, from my understanding. And some other things happened. It made the creation of Real Foot Lake out there in Tennessee, and some other things. But Memphis is long overdue for a Katrina and a Ferguson. So, and yet the people still asleep. Memphis had almost 30 people be killed by the Memphis Police Department over the last 2 years. Almost 30 people have been killed by the Memphis Police Department over the last 2 years. And people say, how many of those were criminals and no good? I don't know the statistics on that, but I know that Memphis have been flying under the radar when it comes to police brutality and police terrorism. And it's a damn shame that black folks tend to get in their way of their own liberation. Like, we won't call it for what it is. We make all type of excuses. We know Mike Brown, he stole them cigarillos. It's like we got the mentality of Bill Cosby when he said in his pound cake speech back in 2004, to paraphrase him, that it was okay to shoot somebody for stealing a piece of pound cake in the back. Black lives don't matter if black folks don't think they matter. It's not about white people. It's not about white supremacy. It's not about racism. It's about us lacking the knowledge of self and fortitude to stand on truth. White supremacists will fight on a lie. They will wage wars on lies and know it's a lie, and yet they will pull all their resources to making that lie a reality and to controlling the narrative of that lie. Black folks, what we do is leave it in the hands of our enemies. We forgive them, and sometimes we don't know why we forgive the people that we forgive. Yet we can't forgive ourselves. We could forgive a Dylan Roof for going into a Bible study on Wednesday night, allegedly on June the 17th, 2015, and shooting up folks at a Bible study. But yet people say, well, Darrius Stewart, he deserved to die. This is black people because he's a pedophile, he's a child molester. He never had his day in court. We don't know the circumstances surrounding that charge. He never had his day in court, and he never will. But he has his day in the court of public opinion, and most folks are basing their perception on Darrius Stewart based on what they see on the news, based on what they read in the paper. Ain't no black person in the city controlling these newspapers, controlling these TV news shows. The only hope that we have to have some leverage is to get into the social media and to do the things that I'm doing with podcasting, talking to you right now, posting alternatives, interviewing his friends and family, doing our research on the Memphis Police Department. Because there's a reason why the Justice Department did not make the Clinton administration, the Clinton administration did not force the Department of Justice to keep track of police killings when they could have. That was 20-something years ago. Because it was required that the Department of Justice keep these trackings of police brutality and killings, and they never did that. But now people have been keeping track, and this year alone, we're almost close to 700 people being killed by the police in this country. And now I don't want you to think about were they guilty or innocent, but you got almost 700 people. We approaching maybe over 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 people getting killed by the police this year alone. And people always talking about, well, they have such a tough job and all this other stuff. But at the same time, your life is just as important as well as valuable as the police officer life is. Why is it so important when a police officer died that justice must be done, quote unquote? You know how many black folks just in this city of Memphis? I go back to Larry Payne and before that, but just dealing with Larry Payne, the guy who got killed in the aftermath of Dr. King last March in Memphis by the Memphis Police Department, where his family was forced to leave the city because they were being bullied and harassed by elements from the Memphis white power structure, in particular the Memphis Police Department, where when you talk to his mom to this day and his family, especially his mom, she can't help but break down to cry, because when she went to the scene where her son, 16-year-old Larry Payne, was shot by the police, they basically told her, "Nigga, don't you touch that boy. Niggas, keep your hands." They told this to the mother of Larry Payne. And Dr. King reached out to the mother of Larry Payne. And he was planning to attend the funeral of brother Larry Payne when they assassinated Dr. King April 4th, 1968, the following Thursday. I believe it was a Thursday. And so that was a setup. Memphis was the perfect place to kill Dr. King because it was an inside job. And that's for another day and story. But you look on my channel and you follow We All Be. We laid out the blueprint on why they had to kill Dr. King in Memphis back on April 4th, 1968. But I plan on having more updates on the Darrius Stewart story. Do yourself a favor, research it on your own. You got the internet. Knowledge is power, especially if you know how to use it. And if you like what you heard today, please feel free to subscribe. Tell your friends, share this video. Please feel free to donate, because we got a lot of great things coming up on We All Be and the We All Be movement. And I'd love to have you all a part of it. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this. In the words of the great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing.